The date is August 15th, 2025 in Anaheim, California. Having just won his 4th consecutive match that day, Yuma Kinagawa is asked if he will win Worlds. He simply says, "I'll win, I'll win." Coming from that year's Japan national champion, this is no passing comment. Hey champs, my name is Professor Josh and I specialize in VGC history and lore. If that kind of thing interests you, check out my channel where I dive into the most iconic moments, legendary trainers, and unforgettable battles in VGC. In today's video, I'm answering the question, why are Japan's Pokemon players so good? And of course, in doing so, we'll inevitably circle back around to Yuma Kinagawa. But before we do, let me ask you this. What does the 2010 Pokemon World Champion, the 22 European International Champion, and the 2024 Pokemon World Champion all have in common? Any guesses? The answer is all of them were piloting teams heavily inspired by prolific Japanese builds of the time. Compared to its size, Japan has had a disproportionately large impact on the competitive Pokemon community. Now when I started researching for this, I thought it might be all the sushi supercharging their brains, but after a bad stomachache, I learned that that's probably not the case. Maybe. But with a little research, what I did find were a few compelling and far more realistic reasons. I'm going to tell you 2 clear reasons Japan dominates competitive play. And then we'll take a look at a possible third, more subtle factor behind their strength in the game. So as always, thanks for watching. And let's dive in.
11月22日、23日、千葉県は幕張メッセで行われた任天堂スペースワールド97。
The Japanese competitive scene is the oldest in the world. The clips you're seeing are from Nintendo Cup 1997, an official tournament held in Japan on the original red and green cartridges. This event and subsequent ones existed years before anything comparable in the West. In fact, it wouldn't be until 2006 that Western players saw official tournament play, giving Japanese players nearly a decade of competitive familiarity ahead of everyone else. And I use this word familiarity intentionally. While these early tournaments didn't mirror today's structure, players were already internalizing competitive concepts that would echo throughout history. Take Toru Miyazawa's winning team from Nintendo Cup 1997. Even with limited info, you can see the fundamentals: type synergy, defined support and offensive roles, RNG manipulation. 3 Pokemon have double team. This game sucks. Japan developed a culture of meta-analysis long before competitive Pokemon as we know it existed. Now, I'm not saying other regions don't analyze the meta. Western communities have built strong analytical cultures of their own. But Japan has been doing it longer than some competitive circuits have existed. It's like the difference between a culture that has perfected sushi for centuries versus one that started cranking out gas station rolls 5 years ago. Oh god. I think you see where I'm going with this. Some of the earliest examples of team theory and meta-analysis exist outside of forums and video platforms and live only on Japanese players' personal blogs. Take for example this speed stat analysis by 2017 Pokemon World Champion Ryota Otsubo. This long-standing practice among a smaller but older player base has clearly given Japan an edge over the average Western player trying to make a Slowbro team work. With that context, it shouldn't surprise anyone that back in 2010 when Ray Rizzo was looking to net deck a team that would crown him the first non-Japanese world champion, he turned to the already established meta of Japan.
Some of the translations were just god-awful, but at least could get an idea of what the metagame was in Japan at a certain time. And so I used that when making my World Championship team, where I had Trick Room team with Cresselia, Kyogre.
Champs, every video on this channel takes weeks to research, and this one was no exception. So if you're learning something new or just enjoying the story, please give this video a like. It really does help a lot. And while you're at it, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thank you, and let's get back to the video. In the 2025 North American International Championship, there were 955 players from North America, 53 players from Europe, and just 15 from Japan. Of the 1,129 Masters players, only 1.3% were Japanese, but by top 32, that number jumped to 10.6%, and by top 8, 25% of the remaining players were from Japan. The United States, despite having the biggest player base, had 0 players left by top 8. One of the most talked about matches of the tournament? Round 10, where Kazuyuki Kobayashi faced off against Yuma Kinagawa. So, What's going on here? How are players from Japan flying across the globe and dominating tournaments with such a small group of trainers? It's the sushi. Yes. No, that's silly. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. In an earlier match that day, Yuma Kinagawa hinted at something that might just answer our question. He said the difference between the Japanese and international tournament circuits is what pushed him to travel to North America. And so I think this is where we need to look. But first, history time with Professor Josh. Yay! In April of 1998, Nintendo, Creatures Inc., and Game Freak came together to form the Pokemon Center Company, which managed their growing chain of retail stores across Japan. These were the original Pokemon Centers. As the company grew, so did its responsibilities, like marketing and event hosting. By October 2000, it was rebranded as the Pokemon Company. During this era, they started running a series of promotional tournaments, mostly to advertise games and merchandise. These tournaments were comprised of single game matches, closed team sheet, and often offered little or no prizing. I guess they've always been kind of stingy. Anyways, as Pokemon's popularity exploded worldwide, the Pokemon Company USA was founded in 2001, followed by the Pokemon Company UK in 2003. Eventually, in 2009, both branches merged to form what we know now as the Pokemon Company International, or TPCI. TPCI still ran promotional tournaments in those early days, just like their parent company, but by the early 2010s, they took a different path. They shifted toward larger in-person tournaments, adopting best-of-3 formats and eventually open team sheets, similar to the Pokemon trading card game. Meanwhile, Japan stuck with their own system. To this day, Japanese tournaments are still best-of-1, closed team sheet, just like they were back in the late 90s. So what does this mean for players? Well, if you're in Japan and want to qualify for Worlds, you'll spend most of the year grinding online tournaments that are composed of ranked best-of-1 matches. If you finish high enough in one of these ladders, you earn an invite to Nationals, which is also best-of-1 closed team sheet. Only in the final stages of Nationals do you switch to the international format, but you still have to use the exact same team you brought through Swiss. That's rough. Think about it. When you have access to an opponent's team info, moves, items, abilities, it's much easier to predict what that Pokemon is supposed to do. In the West, that leads to a lot more predictive gameplay. But in Japan, with everything hidden, players have to cover for more options, play safer, and rely heavily on fundamentals over flashy reads. And in Best of One, if you make a mistake, you don't get a second chance. There's no game 2, it's over. Also, closed team sheets reward creativity, something that often gets lost in open team sheet formats. For example, in Western play, if someone brings Kyogre, you basically know what it's going to do. It's a rain setter. It's going to spam Water Spout. That's it. But in Japan?
さあパワフルハーブこれカクテル打てていた海洋画は24残るさあ海洋画の吹雪
That's a Terra Ice Kyogre that made it all the way to the highest stages of competition in the country. When your opponent doesn't know your moveset, your typing, your gimmick, you can get away with things, and sometimes that surprise factor is the edge you need to win. That kind of creativity is deeply woven into Japan's competitive culture. But don't just take my word for it. Here's what Yuma Kinagawa said on the topic in a conversation with Wolf Glick, Aaron Trailer, and their friend Yuki.
So Kinagawa mentioned that he likes to intentionally include surprising, not necessarily Pokemon, but especially moves, items as well, I would assume falls under that category. Mm-hmm. But if the goal is not to subvert the opponent's expectations, what explicitly is the goal of including these unorthodox move choices, Pokemon choices, etc.? If it's not to subvert expectations.
やっぱり一本勝負を勝ち抜くには
Yeah, he says it's kind of like a prisoner's dilemma situation where everybody is including some kind of like twist in their teams to like deviate from, I guess, the status quo. So in order to sort of keep up with that, that's why he has some unorthodox picks in Best of One.
Oh, that is not what I expected. That is really interesting. Whoa.
This creative thinking and reliance on strong fundamentals isn't an accident. It's the result of a format that has trained Japanese players to think differently about the game, and to do so for decades. As we saw earlier, their competitive infrastructure has been in place since the very beginning. And I'm not the only one who sees this. Here's what Wolf and Yuki had to say in the same conversation from earlier.
It probably does. Japan, in terms of like the average player in any given region, I think Japan is the strongest, and it's not even close. And not to go off topic at all, but we should probably start getting a little concerned about that, given where the next world location is. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things about what make the Japanese circuit and the Japanese player base really difficult. But I mean, just to illustrate, like I actually moved to Japan about a year ago from the U.S. So I was competing in the U.S. circuit before. Now I compete in the Japanese circuit. And I have to say that even some of just the grassroots local events, like the equivalent of like a Premier Challenger mid-season showdown you'd have in the U.S., Europe, other regions, the level I've had way more difficult tournaments just in these grassroots tournaments in Japan than I've had at some regionals and even some international events I've been to.
So who knows? Maybe there's a Japanese player out there who can make that Slowbro team work. And so you get this perfect storm, the oldest competitive community in the world operating in a format that demands near perfect fundamentals. Those two reasons alone can make any region a powerhouse. But I think there's a third factor that almost nobody talks about. And last year when I was traveling, I saw something that made me realize Japan is light years ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to competitive Pokemon. And I'm going to share what I saw with you right now. But first, this next section is really just me thinking out loud, so let me know. Do you agree? Disagree? Why? Drop a comment below. I might even feature your response in my next video. Okay, let's roll the clip.
Please place your baggage in the overhead compartment or under the seat in front, and do not stack items on top of each other as they may fall out. Nothing should block the aisle or exits.
That was a clip from a flight I took from Tokyo to Okinawa. Please forgive the quality. I had to zoom in really far and the screen was like that big. It was a tiny plane, and when I saw that, my first thought was, holy crap, Pokemon really is everywhere here. So look, you're a Pokemon fan, so you've done everything you can to avoid touching grass, and with good reason. But luckily, your Pokemon professor has touched grass for you. What I found with this, in the West, outside of dedicated Pokemon events or the toy aisle, our favorite hobby is mostly isolated. But in Japan, Pokemon pops up everywhere. Pokemon manhole covers, Pokemon themed hotel rooms, Pokemon vending machines, and Pokemon airline safety videos. This constant exposure is real, and I think it feeds into why Japanese players are so strong. People in Japan are surrounded by Pokemon from the moment they're old enough to notice it. And I think the data backs this up. Nintendo confirmed that Japan has doubled the Pokemon Sleep users compared to the US. The average Japanese player outspends the average US player in Pokemon Go. And, more relevant to our discussion, Japan has almost always had a player in the World's Juniors Division Finals. Sasuke Arinori in 2025, Tatsuomi Shimanuki in 2024, Sora Ebisawa and Kohei Ukai in 2023, Shu Harasaki in 2016. It's rare to find a year where Japan didn't have a juniors finalist. I'm starting to think it has nothing to do with sushi. Possibly. More research is needed. But it definitely has a lot to do with exposure. Pokemon is baked into the economy and culture of Japan. Think about it, that kind of exposure normalizes playing Pokemon. It makes it totally normal to sleep with a Pokemon phone app, spend money to complete multiple Rayquaza raids, or even take your kid overseas to compete at the highest level of competitive Pokemon. But honestly, the truth is this. It isn't just history, it isn't just a less forgiving format, and it isn't just early exposure. Any one of these alone wouldn't be enough. What makes the Japanese player base so deadly is a combination of all three, a cauldron of unique conditions that no other region has ever experienced. That's why their player base have been so strong in the past, and that's why they're still so strong today. And that's why when Yuma Kinagawa declared his win on that stage in Anaheim, California, it wasn't just a passing comment. Thanks for watching.
Pika pika.
This is turning into a mukbang channel. Hey champs, how you doing? This video was a lot different, right? It had a lot more commentary pieces, I guess, in addition to all of the historical pieces. We'll see how it turned out. I enjoyed making it. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Anyway, If you want to see any of my sources, all of them are linked in the description below. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out my latest community post. If you ever needed proof that I see and hear your feedback, there it is. Also, if you want to learn more about one of the greatest Japanese players of all time and the team that he's most famous for, click on the video link down there. You won't be disappointed. I'll pause right now so you have time to go and click on it. I'm a Walrein. You get it? Look, all right, look, I'm done messing around. Drink water, avoid cheap sushi, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.